Bam. How's everybody doing? Perfect. Just doing my audio check, making sure everything's good. We're live on Twitch. We're live on YouTube. Oh, hey, what's up? Lana Jones 63 just followed me on Twitter. We'll appreciate if you follow me back. I'll check it out as soon as we're done with streaming. Thanks for joining us. As the title says, we're going to talk about Drukhari. Hopefully everybody can hear me just fine. Let me fix the YouTube chat over here. If you're on Twitch, make sure you're saying hi to YouTube. If you're on YouTube, make sure you're saying hi to Twitch. Let's keep that friendly. Keep that going. Outside of that, things have been pretty good. Want to talk about positioning with Drukhari. Before we dig into that, there's a few other things I want to talk about. Obviously, I have to mention that I have the Teespring store still. That's going to have a link in the description. Feel free to check it out. It's generally all themed merch. It's pretty cool. So check it out. Have fun with it. If you've got suggestions, make them. I'm always open to them. Outside of that, big news in the Warhammer world. This weekend is the Atlanta Open, which is the grand narrative. I will not be working that event. I don't get to be that cool this year. I wasn't that cool last year either, so I guess they just don't like me enough to take me to the narratives. And I'm joking, obviously. It has nothing to do with that. It actually has a lot to do with my schedule. You know, I've got birthdays and Christmas parties and everything else in this end of the year that usually prevent me from being able to do that type of stuff, because making sure I get family time is a bit more important. Well, the video isn't moving for me because the internet over here is super poopy, but hello from the Queen's country. Hey, thanks for joining us, Dan, on your vacation. That's pretty cool. You tell them that they need better internet. I was trying to think of something clever. It escaped me. So just insert witty comment here from me, you know, like, all right, sometimes this guy's funny. Make something up that's funny. Before we dig into, like I said, the Drukhari movement, there's a few other things I wanted to touch on. I am working on a video. Give me 1 second. You silly goose. Try to keep the door shut when I'm streaming. And that's mostly so I'm not bothering anybody else that might be in the house. Come here. Come on. No? You just going to sit there? Yeah, come here. But I had a visitor. She decided it was much more important for her to come in here. Say hi, puppy. Speaking of the Queen's country. She decided it was much more important that she come in here. And I didn't have the door shut all the way. So. All right. Sorry about that. Before we dig into the Drukhari portion of the video, a couple things I want to touch on. I am working on a video about the Old World rules release that they did for the shooting phase. There's some information we can extrapolate from that, and that's really what I'm trying to do is what can we get from that, and what kind of predictions can we make, what kind of educated guesses can we make based off of what we are seeing, based off of what GW is showing us as I prepare for the Old World. I'm going to be running events. I'm actually working on a tournament pack right now for it. A lot of, you know, competitive style scoring, stuff like that, which I will probably do a video on once I can kind of fine tune and play test it. It is based around the 8th ed rules right now, so it will need tweaks once I get the Old World stuff in my hands. But the reason we're doing this video, the Drukhari positioning, is I've had quite a few people in the comments say, hey, yes, this looks like a video I would like, because I had mentioned it in some other things, and they were like, this would be very helpful. That being said, the reason we're doing it as a stream is so that if one of the people who had asked to see this happens to jump in on the stream, they can ask questions in real time rather than throw a comment in and then I answer in a comment and we go that way. So if you're on Twitch, you got an ad in about a minute. while that is doing it, all I'm going to be doing is kind of chatting and setting up a deployment zone and a mission on our board here as we do. Sorry about that. Congratulations to my brother. Give me a second. Looks like he will be taking over a business here soon, as both of us are actually together, and then he'll be doing another one. So again, sorry about that. Just had picked up the phone to get a mission and then was like, oh no, that's pretty awesome. So congratulations to him. We'll kind of dig into that later. Let's pull up the Battles app so we can grab a deployment zone. Boop, 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 boop. I have played so many games. All the games. I did play 2 recent games with my Drukhari. Really good ones. Played against honestly, one of the best orc players I've ever met. And that, I don't mean me, because honestly, at this point, I just am not an orc player, and that's okay. And I managed to squeak out a win. Real well played game by both of us. A couple of minor mistakes, really, for both of us. Let's randomize it and see if that works for our table layout. Hammer and anvil. I don't think that one works for this, does it? It might. What layout is this? Terrain layout. Terrain layout 1. Is that this one? That is not. That is this one. Okay, so this is layout 1. Perfect. So hammer and anvil, and I just did a random on the tabletop battles app. Sights of power, chilling rain, hammer and anvil. So let's put some objectives on the table. Boop, boop. We'll make the objectives pink because it's cute. So we'll just, and as usual, assume that these are not going to be perfect, but they are going to be really close. Okay, so this one's going to be right about here. Ad break ended. Your community is back. Sorry about that. I don't know, man. I don't know what I'm doing most of the time. All right, so there's our objectives. So we'll do our deployment zones in blue. And again, these are going to be rough approximations. I don't know if this app lets me just shift for a straight line. It does not. Oh my gosh. Can I click and then shift click? Nope. All right, so we just get to pretend like, can I touch screen it? Oh, Jesus, I can. Okay, cool. That's definitely straighter than it would have been had I used the mouse. And that's actually pretty close to where it should be. So now this one, we're going to go boop, boop. All right. And again, not perfect, but we get the idea. Now, let me, Sights of Power. I think that's the one where you got to get characters on objectives in no man's land. Actually, I just played this mission against Zach. Yeah. So, and like I said, a lot of people are like, all right, man, how do you position these? How do you do this? So there's a few things to keep in mind. We use the GW layout because most people are familiar with it. You know, you might not play with it all the time, but if you want to play with it, it's very easy to find. It's very easy to implement and use, and you know what you're getting out of it. So now we need one more color, and I guess we'll use yellow because I only get 4 colors on this app. And that's basically to show you, like, your terrain feature is here, and then there's like a little wall here, right? These right here aren't really anything. The main thing to know is that those are low enough that anything can move over them. You'll have some pieces to them that, you know, maybe boop. Same with these. I'll just put a big X here. And then these are basically like this. And I hope everybody can see the yellow. I apologize if you can't. And again, not perfect. It's just so everybody has an approximation of what their boards actually look like. You stink, dog. Not really. Okay, so that's kind of what the table should look like. We're going to go through, we're going to talk about the tables themselves. So this piece right here, like I said, those really don't have much on them. It's like maybe tiny little ruined walls or like the orc scrap piles. The point behind those is that they're less than 2 inches tall, so literally any model can move over them without impeding any movement. But you're going to have models that can't land on them because of the size or shape of the terrain feature. You know, like a knight might have to move all the way over it without landing on it. Now, they can land on the footprint, and I bring that up because that comes up almost every tournament I play in or go to or run. Can this vehicle land on the footprint? Yes, there's nothing that prevents vehicles from moving over footprints. You just can't move them on top of ruins. That's all. This is basically a big U and it blocks line of sight. And I believe right now all of the GW layouts are first floor blocking all the way around. If there's a wall, there's no windows, blah, 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 blah. This is basically one big L and one little L kind of shaped the way it is there. This is a big U. Just got back from heaven. Hell yeah, dude. Did it hurt when you fell? Oh. So this one's just another big U, kind of like this typically. These usually are very small U's. You know, they don't take up the whole footprint. There's probably a 1 to 2 inch gap on either side of the terrain feature itself. And then these right here are a lot like these, where it's just a little bitty thing that blocks line of sight because it's a footprint, but doesn't block movement as long as you move completely over it. And again, this does depend on what feature is on it and what you're moving. You know, obviously there's some differences between infantry moving through them and vehicles, but just so everybody understands the general intent. So we know what we have here, right? Now that we've set the table, we understand what we're looking at. Actually, I'm going to pull this up. Hey, shout out to Cool Nelson and is that Flavia? I don't know if that's a long A or a short A. And a nice little poopy gif, I guess. I dig it. I'm about it. I'm doing well, Cool Nelson. How are you, buddy? So yeah, this is what we're looking at here. So what I would do is if I am setting up, there's going to be a lot of variables here that we just can't cover. The main one is, does my opponent have ignore line of sight shooting? Because that's going to affect quite a bit. My day is awesome, friend. Real good day. I spent some time working this morning at my part-time job and some painting, working on a loon shrine. Got a real big Gloomspite Gets lot yesterday in a trade, so that was pretty cool. So I just spent time painting some Mangler squigs, which are actually probably some of my favorite AOS models now that I've held them and seen them. So if they've got ignore line of sight units like Hive Guard or a Whirlwind or Basilisks, that is going to impact a lot of things. Because I'm not putting any of my witches or incubi on the table. They're either going in reserves or they're going in a transport if I have the transports. The Cabalites I'm less concerned about because those tend to be my objective grabbers and stuff like that. Whereas the witches I need to perform specific tasks. You know, I might need to send them into a unit. So those will usually go in reserves unless it's like just one singular unit, right? Like if they've just got like, oh, here's my 1/3 of Hive Guard. Yeah, I might put them on the table and just try to keep them out of line of sight. But if they don't have any, which I think is going to be more often than not at this point, I think from what I've seen in a lot of competitive lists and games that I've played in lately, there's only a handful of armies that really bring it, and that's going to be, I know Craft World's still bringing the Night Spinners, and they should, and Guard's still bringing it, and they should. But it's one of those, like, there's nothing you can do about that. You just have to accept it, plan around it, and move on, and just do your best to score points. But assuming they don't have just like a parking lot of artillery that's just going to blast you off the board from across the table, here's how I would approach this mission. Okay? We've got one objective here, and the scoring in... I don't stream daily. I stream once to twice a week. I used to have a pretty set schedule, but as we get closer to holidays, it kind of shifts a little bit. And then I have a son who has been in and out of the hospital a lot over the course of his life. And so that also kind of influences my ability to be consistent. But I do once or twice a week, and it's almost always Tuesday or Thursday. So Science of Power, you just get 3 points for each objective, and then you get 3 points for each thing you empower. You haven't done your badges yet. Have I not? I thought I did. I'll look into that after this stream. It's one of those where it was definitely on the list of things to work on. And I won't lie, there's a chance I didn't get to it. And if I didn't, I will make sure that is done by this weekend. All right, so we've got Sites of Power. So you get 3 points just for holding this one, because it doesn't say no man's land. It's just for holding an objective. Sites of Power. And then boop, 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 boop. So if you can, and it doesn't look like there's a cap. So if you control all 5, you can get 15 points. And then, but it just caps at 15 through combinations of empowering or controlling objectives. Perfect. So with the way I build my lists, and controlling this round 1 doesn't do you any good. There's no reason to put a unit right out here. Sure, you're probably not getting shot off the board. You know, but there is a massive shooting lane here. There's a shooting lane here. So if your opponent has something deployed here, they can move up and target them. So there's no reason to give them those free shots at all. So one of the first things I'm going to do is, depending on what my opponent's bringing, my mandrakes are probably going up in this corner here. And there's a reason for it, and we'll get to it. Like, yes, they're probably going to get shot. They're probably going to get charged. That's actually why they're there. We're trying to bait those. But what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that they're far enough away that like a vehicle, like a dreadnought, can't charge them without coming all the way around. And honestly, you want to put them far enough in that you want your opponent to kind of move through the wall with at least one model, depending on what they're charging with. And that's simply because you want them as close to you as possible. Because what I'm going to do next is I'm going to put some witches here, right? So we'll have mandrakes here. We'll have witches here. And we're just going to line them up. We're going to have witches here. And I'm sure you're kind of seeing where I'm going with this. Like, you want to bait those charges with your mandrakes. Rarely do they live for me. You know, I don't care. I actually don't even teleport them most games. They're usually dead by turn 2 or 3. And that's just because of how I play them. I'll throw them out there. I want people to charge them. Because if you've got, let's say your opponent's like, oh, I've got assault intercessors. I'm going to move up. And then I can't necessarily get to the objective. But if I charge you, I can get to the objective. And so, like, that's what you want. Because now they've charged. And you've got an 8-inch movement and an advance in charge if you spend the CP. But we'll get there. So we got our witches. We got our mandrakes. You know, I'm going to probably put some cabalites here. We're going to put some... I wish I had stickers. And really, that's probably what I should do, is start making stickers. And I can just put stickers down. I use racks also. So I'll probably have one of them over there. And then honestly, like, everything else just hides behind the terrain. However you want to put it out. Like, you could put your venoms here. You could put your venoms here. I typically put my Talos on this type of deployment right here if they're not in strategic reserves. And again, it's opponent dependent there. Do I need them up the table fast? If I do, I actually put them in reserves, and here's why. And a good example is, like I said, I played Zach, and he had a very, tank heavy Marine list. So he just had tanks like loaded up right here, and impulsors. Like it was like a repulsor, a land raider, all kinds of stuff, just loaded up right there. He ended up going first, and he just barely moved out. He didn't really go that far, and honestly, that hurt him. So he just kind of poked out. Didn't really shoot at anything. I didn't really give him anything to shoot at. That being said, his turn 1 ended. I went, or did I go first? Let me look. Maybe I went. I bet I went first that game. That makes more sense now that we're getting into it. Who knows? I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing. Zach. I went first. Yeah, that does make more sense. Okay, so yeah. So I poked up, grabbed a couple objectives, left this one pretty much alone. But I did run some Cabalites out just to kind of move towards it. Ran a 5-man of Cabalites here. Basically, I just put 2 5-mans of Cabalites out on the objectives. And then my Mandrakes just kind of hung out back here. I just dipped them right out here. Now, my Witches did advance so that I could, and I rolled really well. But I was able to move them into this footprint, into this U, because I knew he wasn't going to be able to shoot them. He didn't have anything in position to charge them. He didn't have anything in position to shoot them. He wasn't going to disembark his sword brethren and charge them because he knew that the Succubus and or Lilith would fight first, and that even if he wiped the Witches, it just wasn't going to be a good trade for him. Like, he could send them there, but he's going to take damage before he gets to give damage, and that wasn't a good trade for him. So then he just kind of poked up a little bit. His first turn came out, which led to my second turn, and I was able to drop a unit of 2 Talos here and a unit of 2 Talos here for my strat reserves. And he picked up, I think, the Land Raider. I knocked this down to like 2 wounds, like just through using my Haywire and positioning. I was able to just put a lot of damage onto his tanks. So, sorry for the digression. This is, again, if you've watched my videos and you've been with me on stream, we know we go on tangents. So, you get your Venoms. Again, depending on what you're playing, if you're playing against a very shooty army with a lot of vehicles, I probably put the Talos in strategic reserves. Most people aren't going to waste an Overwatch on your Talos coming out of strat reserves unless they have just like some bonkers flamers. But like, most people aren't going to be like, oh, I got 2 last cannon shots, let's see what happens. Because it's just not worth it when you're hitting on 6s and then you're wounding on 3s, and then I get a 6-up invul and a 5-up feel no pain. You're probably not killing them. So now we've kind of covered how we're going to deploy. All right. Turn 1, there's a few things that are going to happen, and there's a few things that we get to be flexible about. So let's walk you through the game I played with Zach. I got engage on all fronts turn 1, and I got deployed teleport homers. So I had, and I think I put a unit of Cabalites right here. And what I ended up doing is I advanced because I have assault weapons with the Cabalites, hit the middle of the board, did my teleport homers. I didn't even try for engage because I just didn't care. I'd rather throw it away, get the extra CP early on so that I can have those command points for something I might need, like a -1 to wound strat on my Talos, or lightning fast reaction so I can -1 to hit something. I just felt like there were it wasn't worth it to overextend myself to possibly get 3 to 5 points early when I could just get the command point and try to make those points up later, if that makes sense. So my Hellions actually stayed back here. They just chilled. These Witches stayed right here. And honestly, they didn't move most of the game. So like my turn 1, I did advance these witches up. My mandrakes came and grabbed the objective. Blah, 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 blah. It was a very minimal movement turn one. I poked some scourges out. I believe like right here. And I had like a real cheeky little line here type of thing. So I shot some dark lances at something, chipped some damage. You know, did some damage and then went back into hiding. And then, like I said, his turn two, largely irrelevant. He poked out, but the main thing we're trying to focus on is how you can position your units, right? So then my turn two, I get secure no man's land and a tempting target. And I forget which objective was picked for a tempting target because he had knocked me off of a couple of them. And maybe we didn't have this exact mission. But we had a mission. Doesn't matter. So knocks me off two of the objectives. Because I think we actually ended up just playing take and hold with Hammer and Anvil. So I just control one. And I think it might have even been this one. My witches, I'm just leaving right here. He didn't move up enough to justify me trying to do anything with them. I think I rolled the advance roll and it was like really low. So I don't bother moving them because I don't want to risk the overwatch. Then, for secure no man's land, you just have to control two objectives, which I do. By and large, it wasn't that difficult. He starts moving something towards the middle of the board on his turn. But the main thing is my Hellions still back here. They're just chilling. They're not doing anything. They're just hanging out. My Incubi sitting right here in the Raider, just hanging out. I'm just filtering out 1 unit to 2 units at a time to grab objectives, score points, and we're basically just going to play chicken. Like, who's going to sit here and score points better? And the reason this style of game is playing into my strengths as a Drukhari player is because even though our book isn't very good, I can jump out and shoot him and then jump back. He cannot. So if he wants to put damage on me, he has to come to me. He can't sit and shoot. I can. I've got 5 scourges, 4 of them have haywire. And then I want to say there's like the narrowest lane here. There might not be. It doesn't, again, it's not super important. What's important is like, even if there isn't, I can take my scourges with the haywire, jump them here, and then I can see all this, fire them, 6-inch moving back behind the wall. I can Dark Lances here, and then unlock this whole lane here, and then bounce him back. And that's exactly what happened. And it was very frustrating for him because he's trying to get to me. He's trying to shoot me. I can't play that game. I cannot sit on objectives. I can't just move a unit out and be like, haha, this is mine. Whereas, he could plant that tank and he can do that. So I end up getting secure no man's land. I end up getting my tempting target. Again, it was one of these outer ones. I don't remember which one, but I ended up getting it. It wasn't the end of the world. But then I get storm hostile objective and overwhelming force, and he ends up taking the middle objective with, I forget what, maybe Grimaldus at this point, which was fine. It allows me to score overwhelming force and storm hostile objectives. And again, I end up killing 2 units on objectives. My witches turn 3 finally come out here. Because again, my Talos here killed the Land Raider. Now he's got to move something else up to shoot. So he still doesn't have lines on my witches. And then my Talos over here, they didn't kill the tank, but then I charged it. So then the repulsor's just stuck with Talos. Did it kill the Talos in shooting? Yes, it did. But did it jam up his repulsor for a turn or two? Yes, it did. So it kept his stuff locked up for an extra turn, which allowed me to navigate this side of the board pretty freely. Now, that being said, we've got my Talos up here. They kill that, right? I get Storm Hostile and whatever the other one I said was. I get take an objective and I get kill units on an objective. Come out here. It's a Succubus and 10 Witches. And they just liquefy Grimaldus. As they should. As they should. And again, absolutely nothing against Zach. I've played games with him before. He's a wonderful, wonderful opponent. He's fun to play with. I've always had a good time with him. He was clearly getting frustrated. And for a lot of reasons. You know, he tends to get a little bit more caught up in what's good competitively and what's not. And so when I've got what is generally considered the worst army in the game right now, he's getting a little frustrated because he's not scoring points, he's not killing units the way he wants to, and the game's just not going the way he thinks it should. And again, there's nothing against him. He didn't do anything wrong. I understand that frustration. Sometimes we all get there. Turn 4, I end up getting extend battle lines and bring it down. And I think at that point I had either killed all of his vehicles or he only had one left, and I was just like, whatever. And I didn't kill it, and then I just discarded it and moved on with my life. And then turn 5, I got Defend Stronghold and Area Denial, and I got little Area Denial, but not big. And our total was 8471. And the point of this isn't to talk about, like I said, the scores, but to talk about the movement. You know, we had the Witches. They bounced up here, and they just sat here for as long as I could let them. My Talos, he left me a lane to bring him in on the side of the table, and that effectively move blocked him and prevented him from being able to get to my Witches, and my Witches just sat there. Because with the Succubus being able to give them fight first, he wasn't going to charge them at all. And then knowing what they do was just like, man, I don't know that I want to mess with them, because I positioned them in a way that he couldn't tie him up with the tanks, and his sword brethren, his infantry bricks, wanted nothing to do with them. And to be fair, I probably kill a third to half the squad with the Witches if he does charge them. But 4-up Invulns are swingy. And that was the big thing with him, was I don't know that I want to gamble into the 4-up Invuln and find out, because he had the 5-up Feel No Pain and the 4-up Save and all the other stuff. Or the 3-up Save, 5-up Feel No Pain. And there's something else in there that just makes them pretty tanky. My Witches over here stayed here till I think it was turn 4. And what I ended up doing was he ended up dumping, I think it was... Yep, he took his Land Raider, came around this way with his Sword Brethren, charged my... I think it was my Scourges or my Mandrakes. It was something right there. I had just a throwaway, maybe some Cabalites just waiting to be the next wave to come out. Charges him, makes the charge, and I'm like, do your pylons, and then I'll pick them up. There's no point in rolling this all out unless you want to roll a bunch of dice. And he was like, oh, okay. But then what ended up happening was my Incubi, I had already, by that point, moved I knew what was coming. I knew the Sword Brethren were either going to hit mid-board, or I knew they were going to come down this way. So I had already prepped my Raider right here. Sword Brethren come here, Incubi Disembark come here, charge into the Sword Brethren. I kill the Emperor's Champion, I think it is. Whatever. He's got a character hunting character that was in the unit. I kill that and 6 of his Sword Brethren. He had Helbricht, he had an Apothecary, and then he had 4 Sword Brethren left. And again, I'm in no way putting Zach down. I understand how this is disheartening. Because he's just I don't understand how Drukhari are as bad as they are competitively. And I said, Zach, what are you talking about? Why? Like, what's up? And he was just like, man, like Drazar, like, why is he +1 to wound? And I'm like, because that's his ability. If he's attached to the incubi, he gives the whole unit +1 to their wound rolls. Like, that's why. That's just what he does. And he's like, man, they're just silly. And I'm like, yeah, I love them. And he was just like, I just don't understand. But then he swung with his, I think it was his apothecary, and he ended up like 100% hit and wounding me on his 4 or 5 attacks. And like every single one of those incubi died. Like, however many hits and wounds he put on me was that many dead incubi. And it was like 3 or 4, at least. And I was just like, and that's why, Zach. Because if I don't kill you, this is what's going to happen. My whole squad is now going to evaporate. And that's exactly what happened. He rolled the rest of the dice. All the incubi and Drazar just immediately evaporated. You know, but that was okay. I expected to do a little bit more damage than I did. And if we're being honest, like, the dice did whiff a little bit on me. Like, the hits, the wounds, and the clapback saves all were pretty poopy. But it was okay because I had contingencies for that. Because he needs to control objectives, and I've limited his ability by, like, taking his units down. You know, he put his tanks in a position where my haywire could bring them down. And what ended up happening after that was I was just able to, like, he had to bring the Sword Brethren back to the middle of the board. And it might have even been for a secondary as well. That's what I'm checking right now. That might have been the turn. I don't know. It was either the turn he had a tempting target behind enemy lines or defend stronghold and no prisoners. And really the only way he was getting any of those was by going back to the middle of the board, because I had just moved all my units away and was just like, nope, we're not dealing with it. So then once those were in the middle of the board, now I was able to advance this unit of witches out, spend my 1 CP to advance and charge, and just clean them up. And it might not have even been them. I might have cleaned up something else with them, and then he charged into the Lilith to get on the objective, and I was just like, are you sure you want to do that? That is what happened. He put, I think it was Infernus Marines in there. I advanced up to here. He couldn't see me, charged through, wiped them. He moved into here with his Sword Brethren, charged them, and I was like, Zach, are you 100% sure that's what you want to do? Like, I'm going to get my swings before you do. And he was like, yep, that's what we're doing. And then Lilith by herself pretty much like roasted the whole squad. And he was just like, yeah, this is stupid. Like, and I'm like, yeah, it's the one thing my army can do is kill infantry. Like, that's it. The Hellions. Let's talk about how I played them now that I've kind of given this like shotgun blast overview of kind of how the game has gone. Like I said, they were back here most of the game. And the only time they really decided it was time to come out was he had some Infernus Marines on this objective. And normally that's not where my Hellions go, right? I just send the Raider, charge it in there, soak the Overwatch, and then follow up. But he had already used his Overwatch on something in here. I don't remember what, but he was pretty open about using Overwatch and not very careful about where. And so, like, once he did that, my Hellions were like, Hellion, yeah, boys. So they moved their 14 inches up. I charged in and was just like, all right, here's my dice, man. And each failed save is just a dead boy. And so, like, being able to not have to worry about the Overwatch and tagging his unit like that of Infernus Marines really also just helped shut him down. And that was the big thing, is like, when we're talking about movement and positioning, I can show you what I do by kind of walking you through some sample games or how I've kind of approached the games. But I can't give you this is how you do it every game, because every game in theory is its own entity. Had he not had Infernus Marines and he had something different, I could have played the game very differently. Like, let's say we replaced the Infernus Marines with Terminators. I now have to play the game extremely differently. Because while I don't necessarily have to worry about the Overwatch, 2-up save is going to suck when most of my melee is -1. you know. Or he could Armor of Contempt it and make it no rend. Or if I send him Lilith and the Witches in, they go from -2 to -1. So it's one of those, like, there's no one size fits all. The main thing is you have to understand how to use your terrain. So like with this layout, most of the time my witches are going to go right up against the walls here. And the reason they go right up against the wall is because I always put Lilith in, I always put a succubus in. If I'm running witches, they're getting a character. The character can make them fight first. If you charge me, I get to activate first and swing out on you. Now, that might not matter. Like, you might just have something that I can't really do anything about, and that is what it is. Like, but if I can throw enough dice at you, especially if I've got pain tokens, I can just throw a ton of dice at you with rerolls. I should chip enough wounds off of you that I can do enough damage to cripple your unit, at least reduce its combat effectiveness before you kind of swing back on me. And like I said, the 4-up Imbones on the witches and melee is all or nothing. I've lost them all to 10 attacks on the dot, and then I've watched them live through like 30. So it's one of those where you never know what you're going to get with a 4-up Imbone. You just kind of have to deal with that as it goes. With the Hellions, right? If you've got one squad, where you put them is going to be kind of dependent on what you want out of them. You know, I think my first game, let's look at the first game I played Friday, because I think the first game, which was against John, super fun game. Both of them were like 10-point games. So, yeah, because John got 40 in primaries, I got 45. The big difference was I got 40 in secondaries and he got 33. All right, take and hold, hammer and anvil, hidden supplies. So let's start clearing the table real quick. We'll kind of walk through that. And again, I don't know if this actually helps everybody. So definitely make sure you're telling me in the comments, like, hey, these are helpful, but it'd be better if you did it this way or whatever. You know, like, give me some feedback so I know how to approach this. I have actually thought about setting up a whole table specifically for this. The only reason I don't have it set up right now is because I'm still cleaning up after the big build project I just did for GW. So my stream table is just a mess. So this is, I played 2 hammer and anvil games today, or that day. So I didn't have to delete all that. Line, try it for free. I don't want to do it. Nope, I'll just go back to what I did. All right, so, whoop. That's the erase button. That won't do what I want. All right. Again, it is close enough to get the point across. Let's see. Go back to, guess I didn't even need to cringe. All right, so we put the objectives on the table. Yeah, you can see those perfect. I should have looked at this before changing everything. What a silly goose I am. All right. So again, I played the exact same list. And round one, so John's list didn't really have much in the way of shooting. And it's an orc list. And really the only shooting you're usually going to see right now is you may see some Burners, which he did have, if I remember correctly, but they were in trucks. And then flash kits. You know, you'll see flash kits until the data slate comes, and then they slap Badruck with a big points hike. I think that's coming. Kind of stinks, but I think that's coming. But you know, so as we're deploying, John's like, "Oh, I'm going to put this unit here in case I draw investigate signals early." And I was like, "Oh yeah, that's a great idea. I'm going to put my Hellions right here for the same thing." And it was just one of those where they might have actually been up in this top corner. Irrelevant. But because I knew he didn't have any long-range shooting, I could literally just park them right there, and I didn't have to worry about them getting killed. And that game, man, I don't know that my Hellions did much that game now that I'm thinking about it. The poison weapons were effective because he had a lot of boys. So my splinter pods were actually pretty good. Oh, that's why, because we didn't use this terrain layout. We used WTC layout. There we go. I was like, wait a second. But for what we're doing, this is fine. The main thing here is, like I said, for all intents and purposes, if we assume it was the same layout, my witches are here, my witches are here. My Hellions were in one of these corners, largely irrelevant which. And again, because he didn't have shooting, I went ahead and put my racks right on the objective because it didn't really matter. It just didn't. So John ended up going first. He got area denial, but I had some mandrakes that were within 6 of the center. And so, like, he just couldn't get to them. Like, he could have charged them, but then it would have left the unit that he charged them with very exposed, and he wasn't ready for that. And he was very smart to do it that way, like to just take his 3 points and not put whatever it was, and I do forget what it was, but whatever it was he charged with, he was just like, I am not going to put them in an exposed position for you to just make me pick them up. Like, your mandrakes are like 50, 60 points. This unit's like 150, and it has a character. Like, no. That's not what we're about. And then he actually ended up drawing investigate signals, which I thought was funny. So he got 4 points for getting 2 table quarters. And then what was really funny is I also ended up drawing investigate signals first. So that was the funniest part about that, was he was like, oh, I'm going to do this in case this happens. And then I was like, yeah, let's do it. And then we both got it. But then I got overwhelming force, and he did have 2 units on objectives. I don't remember what 2. I think he had a truck on this one that I was able to kill with haywire. I could be wrong on that. But the main thing is that I killed the 2 units. And my Hellions just kind of bounced. My Incubi, again, just sat. So it's one of those where you're going to notice a pattern with what I'm telling you guys. When you're like, hey, I don't know how to position this unit. You just don't sometimes. You're just going to sit. And it's not always the most fun way to play the game, because I am a big fan of let's hit the gas pedal and go. But I also understand that that is not going to do me any favors. I did start this game with the Talos on the table, both of them, and I put 1 Venom in Deep Strike, which was a shock for him. Because I think I'm probably the only person locally that plays Drukhari. And I'm going to thank all of you for that. Because up until about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, I was an orc player. And then, man, I started doing the Drukhari videos as I kind of started dabbling into them. And it's just gone, that's where I'm at. This is who I am right now. And he was just like, oh, the Venoms can deep strike. And I was like, yeah, they deep strike inherently. So I can put them up. So I put 1 Venom in deep strike. And that was pretty much it. And that is another thing I will tell you guys. If you're running 3, 4 Venoms, put 1 in Deep Strike. There's no reason not to. Having them all on the table doesn't do you any bit of good for the most part, unless you need those guns on the table early, which by and large you're probably not going to. And if you do, you're probably not winning anyway. It does help keep your Venoms alive. It also helps, depending on your matchups, it will really help keep your opponent honest. Again, like with me playing against orcs, well, I've got a splinter cannon, I've got a shredder, I've got dark lance, a blaster, a splinter rifle, and then the 2 splinter cannons on the Venom. They're coming out of deep strike. If you give me a pocket in your backfield, I'll take it. If he's got a unit of Gretchen right here, but he left me a massive pocket over here, if I can get that Venom in, I'm going to put it in. Even if I can't get lines right away to shoot him, I'm going to put that Venom in. And if I can, I'm just checking my mic. And if I can rapid ingress it, that's even better. right? If it's his turn too, because he went first and he leaves me this pocket here, and I can put it here with rapid ingress, I absolutely will, because then on my turn, I can bounce it up. I can take this objective and kill this Gretchen. You see what I'm saying? So it's one of those where you have to understand how to read the table and what you're looking at and how to, like, how you use your units to apply pressure differently. And sometimes the best way to apply pressure is to not apply pressure at all. And I'm trying to think of the best way to kind of show you that. So again, if we've got our witches here and we've got our witches here, we know that this is 18 inches from the table edge, 12 inches from here, right? So this distance right here is 12 inches, which means this distance right here is probably about 20. So we've got, bam, we can move 8. That gets us to 12. If we advance, we can get even further. So we can touch the middle of the board. Now, if they don't cross the middle of the board, there's not really a reason to move your witches up. There isn't. But depending on what's in the middle of the board, there might be a reason to bounce them here. Because now what's going to happen is if they don't have something to come clean those witches out, what are you going to do? You're just going to, like, I'm going to charge next turn. Like, that's what they're going to have to deal with. The Hellions, on the other hand, if you've got those in a good spot, like, let's say, again, playing this matchup with John, I would have gladly put the Hellions here and felt very comfortable. Because now I just have a direct line straight to the center of the board. And depending on what he puts there, I could put a lot of damage on it. And then even if he kills my Hellions, if the unit's crippled, and then I can come clean it up the next turn. That's the main thing that I'm seeing when I use the units is I have to just assume that whatever I send out is dead. So again, if I bounce my witches up and I've got them protected in a way that, like, I know my opponent can't kill them, which I can do. We'll talk about that in a second. As soon as I charge into the middle of the board, I just assume that the next turn on my opponent's phase, they're dead. Like, that's it. He's going to shoot them off the table. That's it. Or they're going to die because they don't clean up whatever they hit, and then the clapbacks are going to kill them. So, again, I don't know if this is helpful, and I know it's kind of all over the place, but I hope it is. And then let's talk about deployments. And again, I don't know who's still out there. I'm not looking at the chat rosters or anything, but if you've played games against me, there's a few things that you're going to know. You're going to know that I don't play for turn 1. You're going to know that I don't play for turn 2. You're going to know that I play for turn 3. What do I mean by that? I am going to do the least amount possible, turns 1 and 2, to set myself up for turn 3. So if we're still looking at the same mission, I've got 3 units of Cab Alliance, I believe it is, in my current list, and they're broken up, okay? I've got, when I deploy, I put something right here, 9 inches away. You are not deep striking there. Won't happen. Hey, guess what? Do the same thing here. Now, the next thing I do is I put something here that doesn't need to move. Maybe a Venom, maybe some more Cabalites, maybe some Racks, doesn't matter. I just put something there that doesn't really need to move for a turn or two. A lot of times it might be my Raider with the Incubi because they don't usually get into the game till turns 3, 4, or even 5 sometimes. So I might leave the Raider there or here because it's got a nice big footprint. And actually, that's not the worst thing you can do is take your Raider and just block out that whole area there. So you've got 9 inches to there, and then the thing is almost 8 or 9 inches long, and then another 9 inches out. So then you just have to have one little unit here, and now you're blocking. Or if you come up here to take the objective, you're still blocking. And then I start with usually on this terrain layout, for example, my Talos, like I said, are right in the corner. So I have 2 Talos right here. And then they've got the overlap as well. And then I just kind of filter a lot of stuff in here. And I make sure whatever's screening out this corner is not something that's going to need to move. And so one of the things I'm telling you guys is if you're playing against somebody and they don't have anything in deep strike, one of the first questions you need to ask is, do you have something that lets you redeploy or teleport? Like my mandrakes, and this is how I always approach it. Do you have something that can redeploy or teleport? My mandrakes I can pick up at the end of your movement, and then in my next move, or at the end of your turn, and then in my next movement phase, I can put them down. Do you have like the old Phobos ability or anything like that that will allow you to do that? Then if they tell you no, cool. Because then if they come back later and they're like, oh, by the way, I have this, you can be like, hey, wait a second, dude. I asked you if you had that, and you told me no. So now we've got an issue, which, don't get me wrong, 9 times out of 10, it's an honest mistake, and I don't get too upset about it. It's just one of those, at least you can reference the conversation you had earlier and be like, we talked about this, blah, 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 blah. If they do, depending on what the unit is, you just keep them screened out for a few turns until you can get your other units in position. Because as a Drukhari player, what you do not want is you do not want bad guys here and here and then here. You don't want to be fighting on 2 fronts. You want to keep everything in front of you as best you can. Because as soon as you start losing ground back here and you start picking up your cheaper objective holding units, that's when you're going to notice your army starts to unravel. You know, and you don't want to have to leave your Talos or your Raiders or your Ravagers on objectives the whole game. You want to be able to move them out and shoot things and interact with the game. So, you know, if you've got the 5-mana racks and they're just sitting on this objective, what you don't want is to open it up for your opponent to drop a rapid ingress, some Terminators right here, and then next turn move them 5 inches and then have like a 4-inch charge into you or a 5-inch charge into you and just be like, you know, because now you've lost that objective. You're not getting it back. You've lost defend stronghold if you draw it later. You've lost if your opponent draws capture enemy outpost, plus whatever primaries you were banking on getting. So if that happens turn 3, we can assume that you've lost 15 points in primaries for 3, 4, and 5. You've lost 11 points in secondaries just from capture any outpost and defend stronghold if you draw them. And now we're talking about a 26, 27 point swing in the game because you were impatient and you wanted to jump up the board. So what you do, right, is you keep your screenable, like you keep your units back. So again, like I said, like Talos here, you know, Raider here is real good because it's got that big footprint. And then, you know, Witches up in here, Witches up in here, because they'll have a pretty big screen as well. Like when you think about the fact that you got to measure 9 out from the Witches, and if you put them right up against the wall, most people are still not going to charge them. Like they might eat a Dreadnought charge, but before the Dreadnought can get there, you can move them back if you know that's coming. So that's not like something you really need to worry about. And then you've got 9 inches here, 9 inches here, you know, so you've got these big, big bubbles. And then you've got your Talos who can throw 9 inches out here. The Witches will throw 9 inches out here. So you might get something that goes right here, turn 2. But if your Talos are still right there, which they probably won't be, because really what you're going to end up doing with the Talos is they're going to move out here next turn. Again, unless something happens to where you're just like, nope, that's not a good move for me. So you got your Raider. So now we've kind of talked about how we're deploying things. Now let's talk about your first movement phase. And again, this isn't perfect. This is going to be dictated by your missions and your opponent a lot. But if you can move these Witches up here and keep them protected, you do it. If you cannot, then you don't. You just don't do it. There's no reason to throw them away when you could just as easily like have mandrakes right here that could move out and grab the objective, or that could move out here and grab the objective, or that could, you know, there's literally no reason to throw the Witches away when you could simply take it with a cheaper unit that doesn't have a character attached to it. You could advance your Cabalites up and try and grab it. There's so many different things you could do. You could, if you wanted to, spend the 2 CP to fire and fade a unit onto the objective just to make sure you grabbed it. So you have so many options that are better than putting an almost 200-point unit on it and then watching it shot off before it even gets to interact with the game in a meaningful way. If you bring Hellions, you're going to stage them probably right here. We'll just put a big janky H there. And that's probably where they're going to sit for much of the game. Now, that doesn't have to be the case. Again, playing against my buddy John, not a lot of shooting, I can move them up here and feel relatively safe. There's a few things you'll have to keep in mind. Like if you're playing into orcs, if you push that far up turn 1, you open yourself up to a turn 1 wah or a turn 2 wah, depending on turn order. And actually, that was the other thing, is that I kept his wah in check until turn 3, and that helped a lot too. Had I been more aggressive and ate that turn 2 wah, I'd have just picked up my army. So what you're going to do, like I said, is you're going to move up as little as possible to control as little as possible early. You don't have to control 10 objectives, 15 points in objectives right away. You need to try to make them up on the back end. So let's see. So like in take and hold, my first take and hold, I scored 5. I controlled 1 objective. And I don't know if I took more than 1. I really don't remember at this point. But I bet I probably looked at the board, figured out where he was, and was like, all right, I'm going to put 2 units on 1 objective. Like my Mandrakes will go over here, and then I'll advance some Cabalites over here, or I'll advance some Cabalites over here. Take 2 objectives and force you to decide which one you're taking from me. I'm going to lose my 50-point unit, but then I'm going to just kind of try to take that back from you the next turn. So turn 1, I scored 5 points in primaries, and that was it. And actually, take and hold, I'm pretty sure you score this one, which means, let me double check that. I'm pretty sure you do. Yep. Which means turn 1, that was the only one I controlled. And it was really just a matter of, if I take these objectives turn 1, what does it get me? And then his turn 1, he scored 15. So he had them all. And I was just like, okay, he can have them. That's okay. Because he didn't push up very far. And I just focused on using my shooting to soften things up first. Like, he just barely took that one. I think he just barely took that one, and he had just barely taken that one. And so, like, all I really did was just move units in, throw some shots down range, and just be like, cool, pass turn. Scored my secondaries and moved on with my life. Which my secondaries, like I said, area denial was John. Investigate signals and overwhelming force. So I killed 2 units on an objective. Again, I don't remember what they were. It doesn't really matter. But I didn't flood the table. I wasn't like, I'm taking this one, and I'm taking this one, and I'm taking this one. I just looked at what was available, took the points I could, and then was happy with my 5 here. And then, you know, and so that's how I kind of approached my first turn. And like with the Hellions, like I said, you can move them up here depending on your opponent. If you've got the 10-man, would you rather play a Void Raven or 1 Void Raven or 2 Ravagers? So I don't use either. I'll pull them up in just a minute. Let me talk about my second round of movement, and then we'll pull them up and we'll kind of look at them, because I don't really use either. Most of my shooting comes from Talos and Scourges, and then I actually don't use Ravagers or Void Ravens. Most of my other points go into Cabalites and Witches and stuff like that. So, but we'll take a look at them. I personally, if they're the same points, would take the 2 Ravagers, not because the Ravagers are better, but because it gives me 2 units instead of 1. If that makes sense. But I'll double check, because I think the Void Raven, if I remember right, actually has some really good guns. And they're going to fill different but similar roles. And then, like I said, we'll take a look at that in just a second. So let's flip the that back on. So if your Hellions are threatening the middle of the board, you want a 10-man unit. A 5-man unit's not going to threaten the middle of the board. And honestly, a 10-man unit, I don't know that it's worth 200 points, but that's what you want to use. But what you could do also is take the Hellions and kind of put them out here, especially, again, if your opponent doesn't have a lot of shooting, because that opens you up to engage on all fronts, things of that nature. They can advance and do those interactions depending on what your advance roll is. 20 inches could get you all the way into their deployment zone for deploy teleport homers or behind enemy lines. They can advance and charge if you get behind enemy lines with a CP. But again, it's one of those where there's so much that's matchup dependent. But if you put them here, you open yourself up to a lot more scoring because they can still go here by coming around to help with like area denial or cleanse or things like that. But then if you get engaged, they can come up here. If you get behind enemy lines, they can just cut straight up. And if there's a charge target, they can advance and charge to try to use that extra movement to get in. Hey, what's up, Nick? Yeah, no, would appreciate the feedback. You always have great feedback. It is a little chaotic as I'm trying to like walk through movements, because as I talk and stuff, I always realize just how much of how I play is reactive and how much of how I play is based off of what is in front of me. Like, I don't go into games going, this is what's happening every single turn. I go into games going, this is kind of what I'm going to do, but I'm going to read and react, So it's a lot of just looking at what my opponent's doing and then adjusting on the fly. So, but there are some steps, like I said, that I take. So here, you open yourself up to a lot. Same with Reavers. Reavers are very similar to Hellions in their role. Reavers will not hit as hard in melee, but the Heat Lances are very good. Flying over things to do some extra damage with Mortals is pretty good. And the units themselves are cheaper, even if the models are... Actually, I think the models are too. Yep. Because I think Hellion... No, Reavers are just a little bit more expensive. Oh, cool. So now we've got that. If you've got your Hellions on this side, like I said, you can put them in the middle of the board. You can prep to take the middle. You can prep for area denial, cleanse, stuff like that. If you've got the Hellions here, it opens you up for prepping for cleanse, engage on all fronts behind enemy lines. And then if you move your Hellions up here, it does the same thing. The problem is that turn 2 is not the best turn to move them up if your opponent has any kind of volume shooting. Like if they throw a couple of dark or bright lances at you, or if they throw a couple las cannons at you, whatever, you lose 1 or 2 Hellions, it's not the end of the world. But if they're just like, well, here's 30 bolt gun shots, guess what, guys? You're going to lose all those Hellions, so you just sit for another turn. You just run some Cabalites up, take the bare minimum number of objectives you need to score points, force your opponent to interact with you, and you make them play the game on your terms. Let's see. As far as incubi go, are you ready for the most boring thing you're going to hear all day? So I get a boat, I fill it with incubi, I put Drazar in it. My boat either starts here, like I said, or it starts here. Now, again, matchup dependent, but only Mandrakes are only, does that limit you? Eldari have Scorpions Ridge. So I only play typically with 1 unit of Mandrakes. I know a lot of people bring 2 and or 3. I don't mind having 1, and actually, like, I play them with the intent of killing them very quickly. You'll when you go to rewatch, you'll hear my little spiel on that earlier. Because like a lot of times, like on this map, I'm just gonna put the Mandrakes right here. And the main thing is that's to hopefully prevent you from either scout moving or infiltrating if you have those. So like Nick, in your question here, if you've got Scorpions and Rangers, if I win that roll off, I'm dropping first. I am going to drop first. because I'm going to put my mandrakes right here, and I'm going to spread them out as best I can so that I can put a pretty big 9-inch bubble here so that you cannot forward deploy like this. And then the things that I want to prevent you from tagging with those are going back here. So like my Talos, I don't want my Talos getting chewed up, and chewed up's not the right word. I don't want them getting clogged up by scorpions. You know, the scorpions will probably chip some damage, they'll do some damage, but I absolutely don't want my Talos getting gummed up for a turn or two in combat with something like scorpions when they should be out shooting vehicles and charging into heavier infantry. So I will, wherever my mandrakes go, like I might just put them in a wall here too, you can bet that the Talos, or if I have Ravagers, the Ravagers are going to be on that side of the board. And that is simply so I can make sure your infiltrators aren't hitting them. As far as the Rangers go, you know, it's one of those where I tend to sit in terrain a lot anyway, so hopefully that negates Rangers. But I have not felt hindered by a single infiltrator unit. Even like playing orcs, like commandos are the only infiltrator unit that you really get access to. And again, I still only usually brought one unit of them because to me, the way I use them, they're simply a charge bait and a speed bump. Well, and so the reason I think that that's a bit more viable for Craft Worlds is that I think both Scorpions and Rangers have better both utility and damage output. Well, maybe not utility, because the Mandrakes redeploy, the Mandrakes teleport's pretty good, but definitely more damage output and can apply more pressure. Nobody looks at my Mandrakes and goes, oh gosh, those things are going to kill my unit of infantry. I need to be careful around those. And nobody looks at my Mandrakes and goes, wow, those are 5 sniper rifles just sitting there. I'm going to just not walk in front of them. Like, they're probably not killing my character, but it'd be a lot cooler if they didn't even get the opportunity to. You know, like I have absolutely played games where I've just taken one squad of Mandrakes, I've deployed first, and I've put one here, and then just made the biggest line I could across the middle of the board, and was just like, cool, man. Like, if I go first, I'm probably going to charge like the softest target I can, or like find the easiest target to jam. And then if you go first, they're probably dead, and that's okay. But it's going to limit like armies that have scout moves. It's going to limit those scout moves because they can't end them within 9 inches of me. You know, so the way I use them, if that makes sense, I definitely don't feel hindered by having only the single unit and only the single type of unit. Like, I would take 2 units of Mandrakes, and really, I probably should. I could drop 1 unit, because I right now only have 1 unit of Rax, and it's a 5-man. And I could drop a 5-man of Rax and replace them with Mandrakes, and it would probably get me a little bit more utility, but really the Rax just sit here the whole game. And I know they don't have to because of sticky objectives, but if we go back to that whole discussion I just had about deployments, that'll explain that, because it's just the screening. That's all it's for. Let's see. So really, like I said, my turn 1 and my turn 2 are priming for turn 3. You know, my Scourges, I've started running one with Haywire and one with Dark Lances. The Dark Lances, for me, need to start on the table every game. I made the mistake of putting them in Deep Strike one game into a Monster Mash NIDS army, and having one turn where they weren't interacting definitely made a difference in that game. Because, and it's been random, but I'm pretty sure that this is the 3rd or 4th time I've played this mission. But I could have put him here and just locked down this whole side of the table. Because while I can't outrange him, as soon as he gets within 36 inches, he's a target, and I don't have to stay out, right? Like I can hop out, shoot, hop back, hop out, shoot, hop back. And had I had that pressure on the board, it would have slowed him down because he would have had to have prepared for that and just adjusted and stayed behind terrain a lot more instead of having the ability to poke out and just shoot at things. So that was the mistake I made. So for me, the dark lance is 99% of the time on the table. The 1% is like, I've got night spinners or basilisks or something like that. You know, that's the time they go in deep strike, not because you want to position them, but because you just don't want to give your opponent all your good units as targets turn one. The Haywire has been awesome. The only issue I really run into with Haywire is Overwatch is still a thing, and it's still enough to chap my ass. You know, it's not my favorite strat, but it's one of those where sometimes, like my game against Zach, he overwatched the Haywire Scourges. He killed one or two, but what that did is, just like I said, it opened up my witches to be able to come out and charge. So it's one of those where, like, sometimes it just is what it is. You got to eat that Overwatch, and then you send stuff in. So, and then usually by turn 3, what ends up happening, again, if we're looking at this layout, I've got witches here, or both. And then my Talos are usually like here or here to help kind of keep screening. I have not pushed past this point on the table by the end of turn 2 most games, unless I am just like hammering it to somebody. Most of the time I have not pushed that far up, and it's simply because I don't want to overextend myself. I don't want to leave gaps in the back line because I can't afford to fight those fights on 2 fronts. So yeah, going back to the incubi, like I said, they're going to sit in the boat. Here's what's going to happen. If you don't have a ton of shooting, they're going to get out. They're going to sit here. Then maybe they move up here. And then we send them either here or here, depending on what the targets are. The other option is I just move the whole boat up, which, again, it's going to depend. Like into orcs, if they don't have flash kits and they don't have like a bunch of shooting, which most orc lists don't right now, there's a good chance my whole boat just goes right here. And probably wait for my opponent to hit these objectives and then go into them. And again, it depends. I'm not sending incubi into boys unless it's a favorable trade. It doesn't have to be a good points trade, and that's another thing to keep in mind. You don't always have to punch up in terms of points, like unit points. If you can punch up in terms of victory points, losing a higher costed unit isn't always bad. And I'm trying to think of a great example of that, because that does happen on occasion. So like incubi, super expensive. With Drazar, they're in the neighborhood of 200 plus points. I don't know exactly what they are right now. Incubi, what are they? God, I think the incubi are 200. You really need the right timing for incubi. Yeah, no, you are not wrong. If you are using incubi, it is an exercise of patience, and it requires a lot of precision, and it requires patience. Let's see, how many points are they? So incubi, and really, like, I just love them, which is why I bring them. Unit 160 for 10 of them. That's right, because they were a lot more. And then nope, can't say that on stream. He has a very colorful nickname around here. So it's a 250 point unit. And then Sword Brethren is a 280 point unit, and the Emperor's Champion is 75. Okay, so charged him into Sword Brethren, whiffed, killed like 4, 5. I think it was 5. I killed, I think, half the squad. Let's round up and assume it's half the squad and the Emperor's Champion, which means my 250 point unit killed 225 points roughly worth of models, maybe 215. That is a bad trade, right? As a Drukhari player, that is a bad trade. But what that did do for me was that took out 15 wounds that had a feel no pain and a character whose sole job is to go into a squad and snipe characters to cripple your units. So while I lost points on the trade, what I gained in just crippling that unit meant that when he did send it into my witches, all I really had to do was drown him in dice, and there was nothing he could do about it. Like that was it. You know, and even then I don't think I killed them all in that single fight phase. I killed all the Sword Brethren, which took the Apothecary out of the unit. Sorry, that's my thinking. Took the Apothecary out of the unit, took the feel no pain away from Helbrick, and then it allowed me to wrap his unit so that he couldn't fall back, and he wasn't going to anyway, because that losing Helbrick and an Apothecary on a 1 or 2 when falling back is like not something a lot of people are going to gamble with. You stay in your half. I tend to stay on the left or the right side of the board. So, Nick, it's interesting you said that. So that is a big part of how I played in 9th. And it worked very well. And in different missions, it works very well. But specifically, because like this is the mission I've just like had the benefit, I guess, of playing. It's been one of those where that's just what I've done. So like a good example would be, let's, bam. And again, we're just ballparking here. Yeah, I think they're more like that, but that's fine. In this mission, beep, 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 beep. Oh my gosh, I should not have done that, you silly goose. All right, so like, bam, you got this. So you've got this deployment zone, right? In this one, I will absolutely just take half of the board. And what half of the board I take is going to be dictated by how you deploy and what you are playing. If all your mobility is stacked on this side, I'm taking this side. If all your mobility is stacked on this side, I'm taking this side. If you've got all your mobility kind of split evenly, then what I'll do is, again, it's going to be dependent, but depending on who or what I'm playing, I'm taking this side because it's still a longer distance for you to get here. And that's also fair, as having more infiltrators and deep strikers might also influence that. I don't tend to deep strike a ton. I tend to use deep strike and strategic reserves more defensively than offensively. And that's not a right way of doing it or a wrong way of doing it. It's just how I tend to play, because I want the board presence to keep you out of my backfield so that I can keep you in front of me. That is one of the things, honestly, what's really funny is it's one of the things that I have learned since really, not learned, I guess that's not the right word, but I've gotten better at since I started playing a little bit more Sigmar, is because there's so much less shooting in that game, and the units that do shoot tend to be extremely mobile and shoot. I've had to kind of, okay, how do I keep things in front of me all the time? It has just made me better at understanding how to keep things in front of me even in 40K. Like the transfer over has been very good. But let's see. But yeah, if we have that one, like I said, what side I take, whether it's this one or this one, largely depends on how you deploy and what army you have. Now, Nick, if I were to play against your Craft Worlds, for example, what deployment zone do you think would be the toughest for that matchup for me, right? Like I play Drukhari. If you were going to play against Drukhari, what do you think the most favorable deployment zone for you would be? Let me see. And just looking something up real quick. I'm pulling up some, trying to pull up some DZs right now. Let's look at this one. Play the end of the game. Finish. I've dropped my monsters and Wraith Guard as the army is tedious with them. It gives. That's fair. I'm just trying to, let's see. All right, so I think the deployment zone, I tend to, let's just pull it up here. 10th ed deployment zones. I have the cards digitally. I probably should have just pulled those. Are they on WH40k yet? I doubt it. Pedia. I am definitely not using this website. Please do not tell my bosses. 10th. All right. See if the mission pack's in here yet. Core rules doesn't look like it. Okay. Missions, objective markers, feature, mission map. Yep. It is not in here yet. All right. So bam. Let's look at here. Let's grab the blue one. So this one's pretty rough. Because you have a lot of weird shooting lanes. All right. And then pretty sure the objectives are still pretty much like this. All right, so this one's got a lot of weird shooting lanes, right? You've got, oh my gosh, I forgot to make you tiny again. You've got this, my like transparency all. That's fair. You've got this shooting lane. You've got obviously this one and this one, the ones that go around the table. But you actually have like this weird little lane right through here also. So like this deployment zone has got some wonky shooting lanes. So let's talk about this one. I have today just received 15 specials. Oh my gosh, you're the worst human. So again, most of my army is probably going in this pocket. And when you have this wide of a deployment zone, your screening gets a lot harder. So what you're going to do is you're going to look at the table and you're going to say, okay, how fast can I take this and hold it? Because I think you actually, this needs to, well, I can't. Anyway, because I have it on highlighter. This actually needs to be like right here. But anyway, how fast can I move up, get in here to hold this objective? Because you're going to lose this one pretty quickly. You can bounce up and take it for sure. But you're as a Drukhari player, we're going to struggle to screen people out on something this wide. Like on Dawn of War deployment zones, stuff like that, you're going to struggle to screen people out. So big shock, witches are going here. Big shock, witches are probably going here. But they cannot. That's not the deployment zones we're on. All right, so witches going here. If you can get them here and hidden, I would probably put a squad here. But you want them to be hidden. Right here. And then, right, that makes sense. So, like, if I've got my mandrakes, right, if I've won deployment and I get to drop first, I'm not worried about this square from your infiltrators. Like, I'm genuinely not. Because I'll put a brick of witches here, and if you want to send scorpions into them, that's fine. Because with fight first, you're going to lose those scorpions before they even swing an attack. So I can, with your specific infiltrators being melee centric outside the rangers, I'm not super worried about you sending them into my deployment zone turn one. And I'm sure you wouldn't, right? Like, you're going to be like, no, that's not worth. So I'm more likely to throw my mandrakes either over here or maybe midboard to screen. And honestly, I would consider just a big line, knowing that they're going to die, and just using that line to try to keep as much of you in front of me as I can. Because I'm not worried about you dropping into here so much. You know, if you've got scorpions that are sitting up here, that's fine. They don't fight first. If I end up going first, rangers and scorpions together, like in tandem, like you have a ranger and a scorpion unit by each other. You know, but like if somebody puts an infiltrating unit here and they don't have anything that can really hurt me in Overwatch, I'm going to try to advance my witches up here, and I'm going to try to charge into there just to get the movement, just to get the objective, and just to try to get there as quickly as possible. And what that does is it establishes a foothold in this table quarter so that I can start abandoning this one. Like, honestly, I would almost put nothing over here except for maybe a unit of racks that just hop in here and hold that objective. And then if you send something at them, that's fine. And then if I can advance and charge into something in there, that is perfect for me, especially if it's infantry. Because if it's infantry, I'll probably kill it. And then what I can do is, like I said, take that, and then I can start abandoning this. You know, so maybe racks here, and then I might Talos here. Or Scourges actually would probably be best here. And that's just so I can bounce them out and in, or I can bounce them up to the middle and have a lane and back. So it's one of those where this is kind of how I would approach this deployment zone. Yes, you're absolutely right, Nick. Like a ton of the army is probably going here, just because it's going to be real hard to kill my whole army if it's right there. And then the only thing that comes out here is maybe some 5-man Cabalites with splinter rifles for screening. And then Talos, because generally speaking, they're not going to be the easiest thing for you to kill. And if you can kill a Talos right there turn one, then like that game is probably yours anyway. You know, if you have a way to get something from here to here, or has the ability to shoot my Talos without moving, then obviously there's nowhere I could put it anyway. You know what I mean? Being able to give it -1 to wound and it having the feel no pain and all that other stuff, if I can't put 2 Talos here without fear of them dying, then there's not really anywhere I can put them on the table without having to worry about it. But yeah, and then like I said, if I go first, awesome, because that's literally just advance racks into here. It's literally, if there's something here to charge, I know you can give Gretchen scout move with the one character, or if like your opponent has there's some guard units that have it, whatever. If I have something that can get charged in there, it's happening. If not, then I'm just sitting. There's no reason to go up there. Yeah, Phantasm is I'm probably in the minority of non-Craft World players that doesn't hate that stratagem. I actually don't mind it at all. I feel like it's a very, like, to me, that's a very flavorful stratagem. Well, I don't know if it's flavorful. Let me rephrase. it fits in the vein of how I've seen Eldar play throughout the history of the game. I don't know if it's lore friendly, flavorful, but it fits the flavor of how the army usually interacts. So, I'll probably bring Venoms up here and then prep everything for round 2. Because the other thing to keep in mind is you can disembark from a Venom and you can get back into the Venom because it's different phases. So, like, I can bring a Venom up. Then turn 2, I can pop the Venom right in here, control the objective, because remember, the objective's supposed to be actually a little bit closer. I can disembark the Kabalites outside the wall if I want to. And then I can shoot the Kabalites at something. And then in my fight phase, they can hop back in the Venom, and I'll still control the objective. Because again, like I said, the objectives are closer to the terrain when you're on this layout, if I remember right. But that's kind of how I would approach that. Again, I don't know if this type of stuff really is helpful for everybody. I feel like the best way to really do this is to talk through it with people and to kind of play the game. But I don't know if having the drawing board out and kind of showing you some of the moves that I tend to make is helpful. I hope so. If not, if nothing else, you get to listen to my awesome nasally northerner voice. Warwalkers and Shroud Runners with the scout moves are also great support. Yes. Yes. Well, and therein, if we're being honest, that is why craft worlds are as good as they are. And just from a competitive standpoint, simply because there's so many different units that have multiple uses. Warwalkers, the scout moves are great, but then they also just have good guns. So it's one of those the number of tools in that toolbox is so vast that and I'm not putting down craft worlds at all. I'm not. I'm just saying from a competitive standpoint, the only way to truly, I think, rebalance that index in a way that's going to be meaningful for both the players of the index and the players who don't play it is it needs to just get rewritten. And that's it. To me, that's the only way to really address it and fix it in a way that's meaningful, other than just well, now your 20 point per model unit's 40 points per model, and you now have one of the most elite armies in the game. Because that's what happened to Votann, right? Votann came out and they were obviously not intended to be such an elite army. If you look at Votann lists now compared to Votann lists in 9th, they have almost twice as many models. So it was clear the intent was for them to be a bigger kind of hoardier army, or that middle ground, not quite horde, not quite elite. But because of how strong their rules were at the end of the edition, it just cool. Now you only get to bring 5 units to the game. So I think that's gonna do it. This was kind of a long one. I think I've been on here for almost 2 hours. Yep, hour and 45. So let's clear the screen. Before I do, let's close this out. Before we wrap this up, there was one question about Ravagers. Drukhari. See if this is the 10th. Nope. Let's see if they're in. So therein lies one of the core issues with 10th in general also, though, Nick, is that there's no restrictions on list building. And I know some people like it. Personally, I think it is why we have as much of the imbalance as we have. Slide the screen over a little bit. Yeah. And that's because, like, you no longer have to take 3 Storm Guardians in order to take 3 Elites. Like, you just get to take whatever you want, and you can just cherry pick whatever the best of the best of the best is. And that therein lies, to me, one of the inherent issues with balance in this game, is that some of the things that kept some of those armies a little bit more tame was the fact that it was a little bit harder to spam things because you had to pay those point taxes. All right, Rax, which is Void Raven. So we need to look at the Void Raven, and we need to double check the Ravager. Who was it? All right. So the Void Raven, I had a question in chat. Would I rather take 2 Ravagers or 1 Void Raven? Let's take a look at them real quick. And let's make sure points line up, because that also obviously affects things. Bars are back. Oh my gosh, what is all this? Okay. I got a bajillion notifications. All right. Another subscriber, thanks to that. Let's see. Void Raven. So the Void Raven Bomber is 195, and I think the Ravager is like 115 now. I don't know why they went up. I really don't. So the Ravager is 115 points. The Void Raven's 195. So let's look at them. So the Void Raven, you get the Dark Scythe. Let's see. 2 Void Lances and Bladed Wings. And then you can replace the Void Lances with Dark Scythes, and you can give it Void Raven missiles. Yeah, I'm going to do the giveaway later this week or early next week. I went to an AOS GT over the weekend, got my friggin' ass beat, but I learned a lot about the game, and I learned a lot about what I was doing wrong, and it was a good time. And then there's a 40k doubles coming up, and then I think in January we're going to a 40k GT. So I'll have some recap videos over that stuff coming up here too. Let's see. So you can take the Void Raven missiles, which you just get now, so there's no reason not to. So you get a D3 shots at 923 or a D6 shots at 711. And then you either get 2 Void Lances or 2 Dark Scythes. So the Void Lances are 2 shots at 14.4, D6 plus 2. You get 2 of them, which would be 4 shots. And then the Dark Scythes are 6 shots at 8.43 or 8.42. And then again, you get 2 of them, so it'd actually be 12 shots. I think you take the Void Lances simply because it's one of the few things we have in this index that's over strength 12. Like, Dark Lances are really good and you can spam them, but if you hit Knights, you're still wounding them on 4s or 5s for the most part. A lot of NID stuff you're wounding on 4s, some of it 3s, like depending on the build and stuff. So it's one of those, like, if you can take the Void Lances, I think you just take them right now. And I do like the Dark Scythes. They're very reminiscent of the Tantalus shooting, and I will probably do a whole video on the Tantalus again because I absolutely love that thing. And I think we need to revisit that because I think there's a lot of potential there. Then, so for 195 points, though, it's T9, which is the highest toughness in the index. Because I think the Tantalus is also 9. Yeah, let's find out. No, it's not even in here. P.S. It is. I don't need to look. I'm gonna, but I don't need to. At the... Not the Tantalus. I need some caffeine today, dude. Oh, the Tantalus is T10. So outside of the Tantalus, it's the highest toughness in your army. It does have 12 wounds. It does have that mighty 4-up save. So good. And then once per battle, you can drop a bomb, but that's not why you're taking it. You're taking it for the Void Lances and the fact that it moves over 20 inches a game, or a movement phase. You're only getting 4 turns out of it, and that's an important thing to remember. It has to start in strategic reserves because it's an aircraft and it doesn't have hover. So you're only getting 4 shooting phases out of it. And because you're only getting, 4 shooting phases out of it, that means you're only getting 16 total shots. So you're going to want to make sure they count. You're going to want to make sure you're spending those pain tokens on it in order to make sure it's as efficient as possible. Now, at strength 14, it's going to wound almost everything on the game in the game on 3s or better. Obviously there's going to be some exceptions to that. Now, you can either take that, or for 230 points, so 40 points more, you get 2 Ravagers. Now, if they were the same, if 2 Ravagers was 195 points and 1 Void Raven was 195 points, I would take the 2 Ravagers. And not even because they're necessarily better, but getting 2 T9 units on the table with OC3 and 3 Dark Lances is really good, right? Because before the points hike in the data slate, they were at 95 a model. They went up 20 points in the last data slate because evidently we were doing too good as an index. That being said, pre-points, I take the Ravagers. Post-points, I take the Void Raven. The Void Raven, the Void Lances are just too good in terms of like damage output. Having a consistent D6 plus 2 damage as well as strength 14 and -4 means like, oh, you've got the Incarn. Well, I'm just gonna wound her on 3s with 4 shots. How many 4-ups can you make? Fail 2 of them, and there's potential that she's like not gonna be doing too good, friend. And then couple that with the fact that like the Void Raven missiles, yes, it's a D3 shot, strength 9, -2, 3 damage, but even going into something, Ravager's got to, yeah, and I know, Nick, I know, it's just super disappointing because there's so many ways they could have like addressed that without being like, haha, Drukhari players, you're nerfed by proxy. But here we are. You could, in theory, kill the Incarn or the Avatar or anything else for that matter in one shooting phase. It's not likely, but the potential's there. If you get 4 hits, 4 wounds, and all 4 saves fail, even if you roll 6s on all 4 of your damage, that's not modified 6s. You're still doing 12 damage, which is enough to kill most things in the game. Outside of knights. The fact that it's -4 means a lot of things just aren't going to get a save unless they have an invuln. That's another thing that I've noticed is kind of like a frustration as a player, though. I feel like there are more, because of the fact that there's no restrictions on what you can take, it's easier for a lot more armies to have army-wide 4-ups. Like a Marine player could literally take Ynnari detachment rule should be that you need to take all 3 characters and lose Strands of Fate. And honestly, when the Codex comes out, Nick, I won't be surprised if that happens, or if it goes back to like when the Codex comes out, and it may happen before then, but it would not surprise me if when the Codex comes out, it goes back to if you take the Incarn or you take Ynnari, you don't get like all these other things. You can't like how it was in 9th, where if you took Ynnari, you couldn't run named characters outside of the Ynnari ones. Because that's really one of the silliest things about the army is that you can run all these Ynnari units without having to run Ynnari. And it's like, sure. But then what's the point in even having Ynnari if you're not going to make it its own thing? But like I said, and that goes into what we're saying is like one of the biggest issues with 10th to me is the fact that there are no restrictions on what you can take. So like a Marine player can have an army-wide 4-up invuln. They really could. Tyranids can have an army-wide 4-up invuln. An army-wide 4-up invulns can be real tough or real amazing, and there's not really anything in between. Like they can either really really bad or really good, and they can be a real hassle to have to deal with, especially for an army that basically just has an army-wide 6-up invuln and doesn't really have much in the way to deal with things that have an army-wide invuln unless they're specifically vehicles. Like with Drukhari, if you've got demons, for example, the best thing I have to deal with demons is just dark lances, like just volume melee and dark lances. And like if every time I shoot you with my one dark lance, it's a 50-50 die roll for you on whether or not you make the save, and I still have to roll hits and wounds, it just makes it that much tougher. So it's like kind of not the like earlier I mentioned how one of my buddies was like, I don't understand how this army is doing as bad as it is. Well, it's because it's a rough army, but buddy, you have to remember, like, I've played this army exclusively for almost 2 years now, aside from a few dabblings with orcs here and there. And then, like, I've done really well with it. Like, I've just gotten really good with this army. So, like, me beating you isn't because the army's good or bad. It's because I know the ins and outs of my army. And I know them very, very well. And I know what my weaknesses are, and I know what my strengths are. And it just, I can shore up one and maximize the other. So, all right, I know we just had the biggest Midwest goodbye ever, and I just slapped my thighs, which means, well, it's time to go. Nick, I know you're not from the Midwest, but if you just Google a Midwest goodbye, you'll understand exactly what I'm saying. And so that's going to conclude today, 2-hour stream. I really do hope it was beneficial. When I do streams like this, I never know how good they are. So again, just feedback in the comments. Let me know what it is I could do to improve them. The reason I do streams when we do some of this stuff is for the exact interactions we've had. Nick and I talking about Rangers and Scorpions and forward deploys, and then, like the Void Raven questions. I want it to be a collaborative, interactive. And so